Welcome to Florida's Wealthy Divorces, Complex Cases, Expert Advice.
Welcome to Florida's Wealthy Divorces, Complex Cases, Expert Advice with Stacy Beaulieu-Fawcett. I'm your host, Katie Roberts. Today, Stacy lends her expertise and gives us a sneak peek into high net worth and high conflict divorces in Florida. Known for her strategic approach to the most challenging cases, Stacy works with clients who require meticulous attention to detail and a fierce commitment to protecting their assets. In today's episode, we'll explore the fascinating role of forensic accounting plays in high net worth divorces.
Hi, Katie. It's great to see you again.
Hi, Stacy. Great seeing you too. Let's jump right in. I'm really curious. In your experience, what are some common financial complexities or red flags that often arise in high stakes divorces that may necessitate the use for forensic accounting?
Yeah. So a forensic accountant, they're accountants, but trained to look at things a little bit forensically, not just take what's being given to them. And like any other expert that might be used in a divorce case, they are typically hired by the person who wants them to present the information. So if I'm in a case that involves a lot of businesses, then we're going to want to engage a forensic accountant. We're going to want to do so early. And that person will be our expert throughout the case, all the way through the end. Now, I say that, but sometimes, very rarely does anyone want to do this, but sometimes both sides will agree to what's called a neutral forensic accountant. So in that situation, it's not your expert witness. It's not the other side's expert witness. It is just a neutral expert who comes in and looks at things from a neutral perspective and provides their valuation or their information as it relates. So forensic accountants play a couple roles. And other than as expert or in their capacity as expert, they are valuing businesses. They're also business valuation experts. And so they value businesses. And in a divorce, you have to value the business because each party is entitled to an equitable distribution of the assets. So if the business increased in value during the marriage, then each person is entitled to half of that increase. If the business was started during the marriage, then each person is entitled to about half of the value of that business. So the value of the business becomes critical, right? And so along with any other businesses. So the business valuation expert, which is your forensic accountant with a special designation, is the person who's going to value that business. The other thing that the forensic accountant is super important for is calculating income. So we've talked on prior episodes about, income is not just hand me a W-2, let's see what you earn. In most of these cases, these are business owners, multiple entities, ventures, joint ventures, and calculating that income is difficult. Mm-hmm. It's not something you do without a forensic accountant. And then the statute makes it even a little more complicated because some of the things that tax laws will allow you to deduct from your income legitimately, no issue. We, in the family law context, add those things back to income. Why is income so important? Well, it's what we use to do a few things. Income is used to calculate child support, like we've talked about on prior episodes, and it's also used to calculate alimony. So alimony is that support payment from the breadwinner spouse to the other spouse, and the amount is based upon income. So you can see where income becomes a very heavily litigated number. You want an expert to come into court and you want that expert to testify as to what that income is. And you would think numbers are numbers. Numbers don't lie, right? Numbers don't lie. How can two forensic accountants come up with a different income? Oh, they're different and they are very different. So then it becomes I hate to say it this way, but the battle of the experts. Which one is right and why, right? And so having your own forensic accountant expert is very important because otherwise the other side remains unchecked. They can use any variation of the numbers. And guess what? The court has no one else to listen to. No other side of the story to say, no, here's why that number is wrong. And that's what these experts do. While numbers don't lie, there are different ways of looking at different things. There's some discretion, if you will, that an accountant can take. I had a case not too long ago where my client was the owner of a chain restaurant. And what this chain restaurant does is it sometimes will take and buy particularly expensive cars and wrap them with the restaurant's logo information, if you will, and put it out front of the restaurant. And so that's what they did. Well, the other side's forensic accountant is counting all of these cars as a personal item to the chain owner, and therefore it becomes income to the chain owner. So we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in cars. So this is hundreds of thousands of dollars in income each time these cars were purchased and put in front of the restaurant. So there's a very different way you could look at that. Is that strictly a business expense? Because the car is wrapped, it sits in front of the restaurant, the owner isn't driving it. And now you get into those detailed facts. So the experts have to show up, they have to testify, and they have to talk about, why did you not treat it as income? And then you got to dig into the facts, right? And that's what we do as attorneys, is now we're feeding the forensic the facts. Okay, but here's the facts. The guy never drives the car. The car sits in front of the restaurant. How do we know what facts are important? Well, the law teaches us what facts are important. What did other cases do in this situation? And then common sense. That's the role, if you will, of the forensic accountant. And it's super important, but they can only be as good as the information given to them. So the more information they have, which then becomes my job. I've got to get the financial information. I've got to get the facts. I've got to get it to my forensic and help the forensic digest it. But then the forensic has to make their opinion as to income, valuation of businesses. And most of the time, honestly, Katie, if you get two good forensics, they will, once they figure out what their differences are, okay, this one is using, in our story, the cars, right, as income, and this one isn't. They're able to sit down and have a conversation together and at least identify, okay, these are the legal issues. We've got these two issues, and this is why we're apart. Now it's up to the attorneys to deal with the legal side of it. Or they're able to sometimes see why the other one is using these numbers. Maybe they didn't have that piece of information. Maybe it was an error. There can be an error. And then they're able to iron out those differences and get us closer to a number. And then sometimes we're close enough to where we can say, okay, we can divide this number and we can settle, because it's not worth litigating over this amount. So they are key in getting these cases done. They are key in even starting the case, right? Because where are you going to go without a calculation of income and without the valuation of the businesses? You can't do these cases.
That's so fascinating. And you answered a few of my follow-up questions as you were explaining in such detail. I'm curious, is there a conflict of interest if two forensic accountants are hired for both parties and perhaps they work for the same firm? Because I feel like that would mitigate the potential challenges of not having all information and going to battle.
So on the surface, you would think, okay, yeah, that would mitigate it. We're at the same firm, we're sharing the same information, but that would be a conflict of interest. That would not be allowed. Now, clients can waive a conflict of interest. Clients can decide to do that. If they both agree, you can waive and you can do that. But most of the time, Katie, they're in a divorce. The trust is gone most of the time. Sometimes the divorce is just because, hey, we've grown apart. I love you as a person. I trust you as a person, but we've grown apart. Sometimes that's the case. But most of the time, the trust is gone. They are not going to use and like we said before, you can use a neutral. You can use one that is getting information from both sides and making a neutral determination instead of choosing the path that's most favorable to their client, doing a neutral. You've got to trust the forensic. You've got to trust the other side. And it's just not a normal situation. We do it. We've definitely done it. It's been successful, but there has to be the right circumstances to get there. Normally there's competing forensics. You're not going to put them in the same firm. It would be like you getting divorced and hiring me and one of the shareholders in my firm.
No way. Yeah.
How can it not be a conflict? It's too, you can't. And then your
resource allocation sounds like a nightmare as well. And
then you've got privileged communications. Your communications with me as your attorney are privileged, but they're happening in the same office as the other forensic or the other. And so your communications with your experts are also privileged. There's some exceptions to that, so I don't want to get included there, but those are privileged too. And then you get two people in the same office and they're only allowed to share particular information, but not all. You're dead on. It creates a huge conflict of interest. can't do it that way. Again, you can waive it, but not recommended. And so normally there are competing attorneys and competing experts.
Have you ever had to advise your client against using a specific forensic accountant because they made the numbers maybe a little bit more malleable to fit the bias of the person they're hired by?
So there's a lot wrapped up in that question. So I'm going to break it down a little bit. Okay. So sometimes a client will come to me who they've already started their divorce and they already have a forensic accountant. It wasn't someone that I guided them to. Mm-hmm. And it may be looking at the work that they've done already, I'm seeing problems all over the place. Or this has been the case a couple of times. They've hired someone who, unfortunately, the client didn't realize it, but we as professionals know has a very bad reputation in front of the judges, has been caught lying. We have one forensic accountant in our community that unfortunately was involved in his own divorce. And I got too emotionally wrapped up in that and committed some fraud on his own information that was being submitted to the court. So no one is going to trust anything this guy says. I could never walk into court with this forensic accountant and expect to do my client any favors. Mm-hmm. So, people still hire him. I don't understand how they don't just do a little bit of homework, or how their attorney did not tell them, or maybe their attorney practices outside of our area and isn't familiar with some of the things that have gone on.
Google exists.
Exactly. So in that situation, I have to advocate and do what is in my client's best interest, even if it means pissing off experts in my community. I don't care. My client is my number one priority. Their kids are my number one priority. That's what I have to do. That's what they're paying me to do. That's my obligation. And that's how I can sleep at night. So of course, I'm going to tell the client, we've got a problem. There's no way I'm going into court with the forensic that you have. I just had a meeting with a client 2 weeks ago that was interviewing me to hire me. And that's the first thing I said is, if you are married to, this forensic, I'm not taking your case unless you agree to switch. There's no way. I will not be doing you any justice.
Throughout our conversations, I can just feel the passion and compassion that you have for your clients, truly. And where you draw that line in the sand, I'm not walking into court with this forensic accountant because it's going to hurt you. I'm not worried about me. It's going to hurt you. And you never once said it's hurting you, which I'm just I hope I never go through a divorce. I don't live in Florida, but you're my girl.
Definitely don't want to go through a divorce. No one should take that lightly, ever. But if you have to, you want to make sure you have an excellent team behind you. And the forensics are a key part of your team. So it's a long answer to your question is yes, we have to tell clients sometimes, no, you have to get rid of this forensic. Now, if it's a forensic I have chosen, it's because I have worked with them for a long time. I know what the judges think of them. Over and over again, I've seen the judges thank them for being so ethical or so neutral, if you will, looking at things from an objective perspective and just instead of just being one-sided on everything. Because that's the other thing is you want the forensic to do an excellent job and everything in favor of your client or through the lens of your client. But you don't want to show up to court making it look like the forensic has done everything in favor of your client. So a good forensic is going to take the time to say, under testimony or with the judge, I could have treated this insurance as 100% of the husband's, for example, but it was fair because I treated the wife's insurance as 50-50, that I treat the husband's as 50-50. So that's what we did here. Where other forensic will show up and they'll say, I kid you not, just had a trial about a month ago where the opposing forensic treated a certain asset that we were on the chart as 50% as to wife and 100% as to husband. So the analysis, the concept is they did it unfairly. If you're going to treat it one way for one spouse, you have to treat it the same way for the other spouse. Otherwise, you look like a pig. You look like you're not doing things right. You're not doing things fair. Fortunately, my forensic did it the right way. And the judge complimented him again and said, I never have this issue with you. And this is always done right. And I appreciate your honesty in my courtroom. That's the forensic you want to show up in court with, not the one who the judges call out for being biased, even though they're an expert. Hey, they're supposed to do what's best for your client. But you have to be fair. You've got to do it the right way. So yes, we have to we have to tell the clients to get rid of them. Fortunately, again, if it's somebody I've recommended, no, we haven't had to tell them to get rid of them because I'm not going to pick someone like that. I'm not going to take a chance with, the new person in town or whatever the case may be. So
I'm just curious. I mean, when you do have a client come to you and they have their own forensic accountant that you don't really know much about or you have a negative opinion about, how often do they change their mind so that they can work with you or you let them leave?
Almost every time, because, I'm not just saying, hey, this is my preference. I'm big ego and I want it my way. It's about their case. So when they see that and understand that, normally they've already gotten an inkling one way or the other that this person is a problem. They've had a gut instinct on it. The one I was telling you about that was interviewing me, that's exactly what he said to me. He said, I really didn't feel like this was the right person. I've had some issues. I wondered if I could change what that would look like mid-case. And so that's normally the case, right? They already know it. You have a gut feeling on it. Your gut is normally right. Sometimes it's fear, but your gut is normally right.
How does a forensic accountant work alongside an attorney to identify and address those financial fraud or deceptive practices, especially when one party is really trying to conceal assets?
That's what they do, right? So it's like saying, well, how do I get divorced? Well, that's what I do. So I've got it. That's what they do. That's why they're forensic accountants and not just a CPA or just an accountant. So sometimes people say, well, can't I just use my accountant to do this for me? Absolutely not. First of all,
Ben Affleck, accountant.
Yeah, not a good idea to do that. So no, you can't do that. The forensic, our role as attorneys is to give the forensic everything that they need to do their job. So we have at our disposal the subpoena powers of the court. I can issue subpoenas all over anywhere and require people to produce documents or take depositions and get information. And so I know, obviously doing this 20 years, that, what information my forensic needs. So I'm already working on gathering all of that. When the forensic dives into that information, that's where that communication and that relationship with the forensic is important, because when they dive into it, they're going to come back to me and say, okay, here's what I've found. I've got questions. And so they're going to give me the questions, the more information that they need. And it's normally entities that they found that weren't disclosed or income from a source that wasn't disclosed. And now I'm doing more attorney work to get that information for them. So that's the overlap between the two. What do you need? Okay, I'm going to go get it. Oh, you need more? I'm going to go get it. And so as long as they have what they need, they have a complete financial picture, then we're able to sit down and settle, right? Because now we have the information we need. Why can't we settle? We have the numbers. Sometimes people are unreasonable. We can't settle. We go to trial.
I feel like there's just an elephant in the room. It could be my room, but how are the forensic accountants? What tools or methods are they using to uncover such a vast amount of information?
It's a lot of detail work. And it's probably a great thing for a future episode for us to bring one of the forensics on and kind of dive into their brains. So we'll definitely do that in the future. But, the starting point for them, and I'm not a forensic accountant, so I can't go into detail, but the starting point for them is really all of the financial documents we can get our hands on. And then they're following every transaction in those documents to make sure that they have accounted for all of those transactions. So just on the most simple level, when it comes to that, is you look at a bank statement, you see a wire out for $100,000. Where did it go? Did we invest in something? Did we give money away? Did we buy the girlfriend a condo? Where did it go? So just following that paper trail. Okay, now we found that. What other money is in that account? Let's look at all of those statements. So that's how we find a lot of time accounts, is just the transfers in and out. Now, of course, people are using Bitcoin, and we're using Venmo, and we're using Zelle, and we're using all these things. So it's a more detailed work. People think that they can just hide money if they just put it in Bitcoin. Well, how did they get there? You didn't.
The blockchain. You follow the money. It's not paper. You just follow the
follow it. Exactly. Wow. So that's what they do. They're following, but then at some point there might be more information that they need once they hit, okay, that I don't have any documents for that. I need more information for that. And then it comes back to my lap to say, okay, I need subpoenas. I need depositions. I need to know, where did that money go? Why did you give it to that person? Sometimes it's a joint venture. It went to an individual, but it's a joint venture that they've started. So now I'm taking that person's deposition so that we can figure out what is this business you guys are in? Where's it going? And then a lot of times we don't believe that person. So we get a lot of other names in that deposition so that we can ask those other people questions. So it's following it. It's a paper trail and then uncovering everything that paper trail leads to.
Stacy, that was fascinating. Thank you so much. That's going to bring us to the end of our show today. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for tuning in to Florida's Wealthy Divorces, Complex Cases, Expert Advice with Stacy Beaulieu-Fawcett. To connect with Stacy, head to blgfl.com, like, subscribe, review, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.